Good evening, everybody, and I would love to welcome you all back to the number one viewed youth television program brought to you on CAN-TV, which is the West Garfield Park Youth Council television show. We have a great show for you all tonight with a impactful and powerful guest with us this evening. So I want you all to sit back, relax, have your listening ears open and your thinking caps on because this is a ride that you will want to take. Uh, Before we begin, I have a few announcements that I would like to announce. This Saturday, we will be going to a UIC basketball game. It's a free fall basketball fun with Fathers Who Care. The West Garfield Park community stakeholders and the West Garfield Park Youth Council present the UIC Flames basketball game. That date for that basketball game is this Saturday, January the 11th at 3 o'clock p.m. We will be meeting up at 4540 West Washington at 1 o'clock p.m. That will be the departure time. Once again, that's the UIC basketball field trip game scheduled for this Saturday at 4540 West Washington. Meeting time, 1 o'clock p.m. For more information about that, please give Fathers Who Care a call at 773-287-5821. Also, New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church Safe Haven After School program has just begun. It's a fun-filled after-school program from kindergarten to 12th grade. The time is from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Daily. They offer, free nutritional snacks, games for the kids, captive structured activities, conflict resolution, and things that the kids can really enjoy and be involved in. That's with New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church located at 4301 West Washington Boulevard. For more information on that, also give Fathers Who Care a call at 773-287-5821. Also, one last announcement, North Lawndale Employment Network, if you're interested in weatherization and want to learn and be trained how to weatherize homes and keep the homes warm for the winter, it is a paid training where you can earn a few $100 to learn how to weatherize houses and also get certified into doing this. That's the North Lawndale Employment Network Weatherization Program. For more information about the weatherization piece, the UIC game, and the Safe Haven After School program with New Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church, please give Fathers Who Care a call regarding those events at 773-287-5821. Again, at 773-287-5821. Let's get started with the show. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Elam, and I am the president of the West Garfield Park Youth Council, which is sponsored by Fathers Who Care. Fathers Who Care is a non-for-profit organization on the west side of Chicago within the West Garfield Park community. Again, everyone, my name is David Elam, and I'm the president of the West Garfield Park Youth Council. The West Garfield Park Youth Council is comprised of 30 youth, which has increasingly grown since our last season from our community, whose focus and concern in the youth leadership and to voice within the community and addressing the issues of violence prevention. We invite people from all over, especially youth, to come out and see what we're all about. Our show will be scheduled every Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m. Again, that is every Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m. We would like to encourage calls from people watching to call and leave your questions and comments at 312-738-1060. Again, that is 312-738-1060. Our show can also be viewed online if you cannot catch those phones at www.cantv.org/live. Again, that is www.cantv.org/live. Well, everyone, I notice you all see this gentleman sitting on the side of me, and I will give him the pleasure now to introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm attorney Lewis Myers, and I'm on the board of directors, recent member of the board of directors of Fathers Who Care. I'm also a professor, full-time professor, right now over at Chicago State University. I am one of the legal counsel for the Rainbow Push. I've worked with various organizations over the years, civil rights, human rights organizations. I live on the west side. and I'm a member of the New Mount Pilgrim. I heard you just talk about my
Yeah.
church.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Lou Myers, we want to thank you for being a guest on our show tonight.
Sure.
Again, everyone, if you're just tuning in, my name is David Elam, and I'm the president of the West Garfield Park Youth Council. You're watching a live interactive television program brought to you by CanTV Channel 21. During the next hour, we're going to discuss the topic of community empowerment, also with bridging the intergenerational gap between young people and mature adults while creating a safe and drug-free community. And I invite our viewers watching to please call in with your questions and comments at 312-738-1060. Our phone lines are now open. Okay, Mr. Myers, today's topic for the viewers, we're going to discuss community empowerment, also with bridging the intergenerational gap between young people and mature adults. When you hear that term, bridging the intergenerational gap, what comes to mind? What triggers you to speak on that thought?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is two different generations. When you say intergenerational, that automatically, either explicitly or implicitly, implies that there are two different generations.
Correct.
We know the two different generations that we're talking about is your generation and mine.
Correct.
You know, I'm of a different generation, and your generation is a younger generation coming along. And the big challenge of the 20th century, the big challenge in our communities, the big challenge in this country is how do we connect, not disconnect, but how do we connect young people, old people, particularly in the African American community. What can we do to bridge the gap? Well, if you're going to bridge a gap, you have to presume that there is a gap. Is there a gap, first of all, we should talk about, is there a gap between the younger generation of African Americans and older generation?
Correct.
If there's not a gap, then is the level of dialogue, the level of communication, the level of interaction, the level of intergenerational thoughts and ideas, are they being transmitted and transformed where both generations feel that they are on the same page and are in accord with what is in fact going on? And so the big challenge, is to talk about, is there a gap? My answer is yes, there is. Unfortunately, my generation has not done a meritorious or a good job in passing on all of our pains, our glories, our experiences, and what we experienced over the last 40 or 50 years to young people coming along. Many of my heroes may not be your heroes. Many of the things that I did that you don't know about, and many of the things that you're doing now that I don't know about,
Correct.
constitutes a generational gap. Because if we're not talking and if we're not understanding, the differences between then and now, if we're not understanding, sufficiently appreciating that we now are living in a different time in a different place, if we don't appreciate as the older generation that it is a responsibility, that's a very key word, it is a responsibility of my generation to pass on the burdens, the pains, the glories, the failures, the successes of what we went through. Because then that gives you an anchor, something to pull up on to know, hopefully, what you should do and do better, what you can and cannot do, or what you should or should not do, based on the pains that many of us in the older generation have already sustained and already gone through. But if we are not communicating, if there is no intergenerational communication, then at the end of the day, everything that I experienced, if I haven't passed it on to you, you are bound to go through it.
Exactly.
And not have learned from it because my generation didn't take the time to institutionalize what we went through. And your generation, there's a gap between us, and we're not talking and sharing our experiences, so you don't know where it is. And so in one sense, the younger generation is kind of out there on their own. Because if we are not giving you direction, and if we are not sharing our pain and all of what we went through, then you are bound to go through some of the things that you could possibly avoid, a little bit differently.
So is it safe to say exactly that the reason why the intergenerational gap is so not effective is because there's a lack of communication. When you say a lack of communication, why do you think that lack of communication is? Why do you think the younger generation and the more mature generation are not communicating to bridge this intergenerational gap?
I don't think it's anything malicious. I don't think it's necessarily anything that's purposeful. Let me just say this. There are always intergenerational gaps. You know, when I came up and I was sitting where you're sitting now, how old are you?
23.
You're 23 years old. When I was 23 years old and I was looking back at the generation that preceded me, I thought they were a bunch of old fogies. These guys didn't know what the hell was going on. And at that particular time, you know, there was not a lot of communication between generations then. You know, the older folk looked at us as being a wild group of young folk just out of control. And we looked at them as being old folk and didn't know what they were talking about. And so we didn't give them a lot of respect. Intergenerational gaps are not anything new. You know, what we have to do is, and I think this is where everybody, both the old generation and the young generation, we have to realize the absolute essentiality that we talk. And we have to have forums, you know, where we meet. You know, we do that with fathers who care. We got to bring in fathers into the room. We got to bring in boys into the room. We got to bring children into the room. And those of us who have gone through life experiences will have to sit there and share what we think, you know, our failures were, what we think your successes might could be based on our failures. And you all have to tell us where you think that we are not doing what we're supposed to do, and where you perceive we may have gone wrong at one point, and that can help us. So it's got to be an exchange, but nobody should take the viewpoint that there's any malignancy or there's any viciousness or any hatred or any dislike. You know, we just have to learn to talk and share. I need to understand Lil Wayne, and you might need to understand Otis Redding. And, you know, and I just use those two names because Lil Wayne, you know, is kind of a very popular artist now, like Jay-Z.
Yeah.
There are different generations. And there are people in my generation, Jackie Wilson. You know, we have to, I mean, even in terms of music, in terms of theater, in terms of acting, hey, we need to understand, I need to tell you about Stokely Carmichael and Rap Brown, two people you may or may not have ever heard of. And you need to explain to me about some of the young youth black leaders that are in our town that I ain't never heard of. And we need to get all of us in the room and share the experiences that we have and get to know each other and learn from each other and work with each other and aid each other. You know, that's some of the things that I think we should be doing.
And where does community empowerment with this bridging and generational gap fall into place? Because I know that wanting to empower your community and actually empowering your community takes a lot. How does the intergenerational gap come together to...
Well, let me ask you a question. To you, what is power?
To me, power is...
Now, I don't mean to be the quintessential professor now.
Power, I understand.
I do this in my classes.
I understand.
Because it's important. If you want to know, you know, how do we empower our generation, then we need to start from a definition of what is power.
Exactly.
I mean, how do you empower something? How do you empower somebody? What does that mean? Are you giving them something? Are you giving them encouragement? Are you giving them strength to aspire? Are you giving them money? Are you giving them wealth? What do you mean? Let's start with the very fundamental question of what is power? You got an idea about that?
I believe in my definition or my sense of what power is just a sense of strength, a sense of wanting to have some type of control.
Okay, that's a good word, control.
Or a sense of, you know, order.
Okay, that's fine.
Because with power or a certain type of power comes order, comes discipline.
That's right.
Comes restraint.
That's right.
Comes education, and comes with the terms of wanting to let people know where they stand or what position you should take.
I think those are I think that's a very good answer. Two real key words that we have to talk about, and this is what I want the listening audience to also call us in and talk about. When we talk about empowering people, power also deals with influence.
Yes.
Power deals with control. Two very key words. Because if you can't control anything, and if you don't have the ability to influence something,
Exactly.
then that's a lack of power. I could sit here for the rest of the night and talk about what I think the world ought to be like. But the real challenge would be to talk about the way the world is and what can we do through power or through empowerment. What can we do as a group? Individuals can be empowered, and nations can be empowered, and groups can be empowered. So there are different levels of empowerment. When we talk about empowerment, and particularly when we're dealing with African American youth, we're talking about giving them the ability to control and have influence on their destinies. That's whether you're in the schoolhouse or the church house. That's where where you may be in your home. Power has multiple levels of influence. But when we're talking about how do we empower each other, we're talking about giving each other the ability to make decisions, to control, to have influence, and to pass that influence on to assist and aid other individuals in also being empowered for whatever their goals and aims are in life.
I agree 100% with that. With that being said, with the word empowerment, which is a very empowered word, I just learned something about, because you just broke that word empowerment down. With community empowerment, because I know you do a lot of work at Chicago State and things, being the person that you are and doing the work that you do, what are you doing exactly to strengthen youth, to build youth up, to, like you said, empower us, to make us want to do better and see better and succeed and further in life?
One of the things that I've done, and the reason why I'm in the field of education now, I enjoy working with students. And I think, I come from a family on my father's side of the family of educators. I mean, all of my uncles, my aunts, my sister, they were all school teachers.
Okay.
And my father's baby brother was a school teacher. His sister was a school teacher. My father's mother was a school teacher. My mother's mother was a teacher at Grambling University some years and years ago. Most of my cousins. So I come from a family of educators. Education is a source of power. Why? Because education involves the learning process. When you are teaching people about life and teaching people about development and teaching people about the world as it is, you are really empowering them through knowledge, through learning, to teach them things that they can then go back and empower themselves to do better, to make good decisions, to help each other, to learn who, and I know this gets to be controversial, sometimes we don't even know who our own enemies are. We don't even know who to fight and not to fight. Many times, some of us doesn't know what's good and what's bad. Empowerment is a process. One aspect of it is a process of learning. Another aspect is a process of teaching. And a third aspect of empowerment is a process of learning how to implement what you've learned and what you've taught, but turn that into something real where then you can benefit from it and you can help other people benefit from it to help themselves in terms of their development, in terms of their ideas, in terms of their visions, and in terms of their goals and where they're going in life.
I agree. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you're just tuning in to our show, my name is David Elam. I'm the president of the West Garfield Park Youth Council, and my guest tonight is Mr. Attorney Lewis Myers. And the topic that we're discussing tonight is community empowerment, along with bridging the intergenerational gap between young people and mature adults while creating a safe and drug-free community. Now let's jump back, shall I say, to the bridging the gap piece while creating a safe and drug-free community. When creating a safe and drug-free community. What needs to happen in order for that to succeed?
Well, when we think of the word safe in Chicago, rightly or wrongly, we think in terms of whether we get shot coming out of our house or dying and living. Safe. The word safe in Chicago implies survival.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about, we got a program over at New Mount Pilgrim, the Safe Haven, that involves a Safe Haven program. Well, Safe Haven means something more than a place for kids to come and eat snacks and play basketball. Safe Haven is a refuge and a place for them to come out of safety and protection, a place where they don't have to experience violence, they don't have to be shot trying to get home to school or shot trying to go to school in the morning. So when we talk about safe, bridging the gap, when we talk, anytime that we talk about to making things safer, we're talking about people learning to respect each other.
Exactly.
So when we talk about safety, see, one of the problems that we experience in Chicago, a major problem, and I teach a class in gangs and community violence at a Chicago State. A major problem of it is, the biggest people, most people in our community, we're killing each other.
Exactly.
We're not safe from each other. In my neighborhood, sometimes I'm scared to come out the house because I know you got crack dealers and heroin dealers on my corner. At the end of the day, that kind of problem is out there, but the real challenge of it is, how do we address that? How do we bridge the gap between the realities of the community or the communities that we live today and what's happening on the streets? And, when we talk about trying to understand that, we're going to have a deeper understanding of community life, a deeper understanding of we're talking about bridging the gap. How do we bridge the gap with each other? How do I talk to my neighbor? That's my brother and my sister that I see every day. I got a pass, to go where I want to go. So before I try and worry about bridging the gap in the world, how do you get to know your neighborhood? How do you get to know the people in your life, the children in your community? How do you reach out and get them to understand who you are and you to understand who they are, just to live together safely in the same neighborhood?
Exactly.
I think there's a caller maybe.
Yeah, we have a few calls. We're going to take the calls and come right back. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling. Your question or comment, please.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Your question or
Yes.
comment, please.
My question is to Mr. Myers, and the question is, do you think the mature generation is losing the ability to communicate with the upcoming generation?
See, I don't know what the mature community is. I don't know what it means to be a mature community. Maybe implicit in the word mature is developed, people who are farther along, in terms of wisdom and knowledge and experience. If you're using that for the mature community, then I think, we have to just learn that we are all, when it comes to learning, I can learn as much from you tonight as you can learn from me.
Exactly.
You are mature. To the extent that you have life experiences, you realize the need to do this kind of work, work with young folk, go out into the community, try and help and assist, aid them in what they do. That's maturity to me. You don't have to be 70 years old to be mature like that. You can be 17. So what we need to do is, how do we hook up people, right, who share common experiences and ideas, but from different generations, and how do we get them into the room so that they can talk, and so that they can meet and they can share their pain, their glory, their experiences, and we can kind of grow and develop together. You are a teacher for me. I don't ever go into this, I'm the elder, and so I can teach you. There are things in life you can teach me. There are things in life I can share with you, I can help you with. When we walk into the room like that, one is not shining on the other, but we walk in intergenerationally, two different generations learning and sharing each other's ideas and thoughts to help better our community and better our way of life and better who we are.
I'm going to take this next call and come right back. Oop, we lost that call. Feel free to call back. Ladies and gentlemen, please call us at 312-738-1060. I want to pose a question to the viewing audience tonight. How do you think or what do you think needs to be done in order to bridge the intergenerational gap between young people and mature adults while creating a safe and drug-free community? Please give us a call and share your thoughts with us at 312-738-1060. Again, that's 312-738-1060. Okay, Mr. Myers, with the community empowerment is creating...
Let me just say one thing about community empowerment. Everything that we're doing, most of what we're doing, that's not everything. Most of what we're doing is really, if we're sincere, we're trying to help other people.
Okay.
I ain't just trying to be rich for me. I mean, me being rich and my brother is starving. My brother does not have a house. My brother is a crack addict. My sister is a heroin addict. You know, I can't live and be successful unless I can do something about that.
Okay.
And so one of the key things that we have to talk about is that success for us and what we're doing depends on how do we work together as a group, as a community, to help each other. No one guy should stand out and say, I want to have all of the money in the world.
Exactly.
I want to be the world famous basketball player, the world famous football player, and I don't care about other members in my community. No, if that's your attitude, then you don't deserve whatever you're doing now. And God willing, you know, maybe it'll get taken away from you because your arrogance and ignorance, you know, and your disrespect for those who made you, you know, puts you into the category that you can't appreciate them. So we're talking about all being able to work together. Community empowerment is not necessarily trying to see one black guy over here who's had it all and doesn't want to associate with us, but it's everybody getting together to try and make a difference and helping each other and sharing.
Okay, it looks like the phone lines are blowing up. We want to go ahead and take these next few calls. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling tonight. What's your question or comment, please?
Hello?
Hello?
I was wondering, what can we do to empower the community?
Well, there are many things that you can do. I mean, I don't really know where to even start with that. You know, I can start in your home. I can start in your community. I can start with your everyday, what we do. I mean, just take what Father Who Cares does. If we do nothing else but get men and fathers to relate to sons and to develop better family relationships, you know, that's a major what? Empowerment. If you learn, right, the history and the pain and all of what involves your daddy, and if he respects you and learns your pain and what you're trying to do as a son, if we could keep you two talking, that could have an intergenerational effect. How? Because you'll take what you're learning from your daddy and you'll use that one day when you have a son. And you would build upon that, and your son would benefit from the dialogue, and then that rolls over into community relationships, family relationships, you know. And so empowerment means the ability to influence thought, influence actions, influence conditions for the benefit of everybody, particularly the community and the people that you live with every day. So anything that I can do to advance you. If you came to me tomorrow and said, I have a problem and I need A, B, and C, and I said, well, then I want to work on that problem. I want to help you, right? Then because what I'm really saying is I want to what? Empower you to learn, to think, to do better, and to be successful. And so empowerment comes in multiple forms. And there are multiple ways you can empower in the church. People through the church, through schools. I mean, look, you walk by gangbangers every day. And don't say nothing to them. And say, oh, man, isn't it a shame? They're out here robbing and stealing and selling crack, jumping on each other, murdering folk. Well, what are you doing to empower your community by challenging them? Well, let's get into some real empowerment stuff. Empowerment is not just the mammy-pammy stuff. It's what do you do? What are you willing to do? Are you willing to put your life on the line to challenge things, even as a young person, that you think is wrong? If you think that there's a murder problem or a gang problem or a violence problem, let me put it back on you. What are you doing? You doing, not me. I mean, what are you doing to empower yourself to address that problem, to make a difference in your home, your community, and your life, and the life of the people that you live with? Do you want your 5-year-old son to have to walk, to have a safe haven, a safe haven program to protect him to get to the first grade in elementary school so he won't get killed by a gangbanger? And if you don't want that to happen, what are you prepared to do? Are you prepared to walk him to school? Are you prepared to organize other parents? That's empowerment. You can empower yourself to make a difference in life, but that takes courage, it takes foresight, and it takes the ability to say, if this is right, there's no cost that I'm willing to pay, to go forward.
Okay, I want to take our next caller. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling this evening. Your question or comment, please.
Hello. My question is, what's destroying our community?
Well, I guess David and I could be here until next year on that one.
Yeah,
In
because it's
fact,
a lot about that.
that's a 150-piece program, 150-week program. There are multiple reasons. There is no one set thing that I'm prepared to say as a professor, that we can say, if you solve this problem, all the other problems are going to go away. No such thing exists. In terms of what I teach in my class, I taught criminology also at Chicago State, and what I teach my students is that the problem in understanding crime and violence, it's a multidisciplinary problem. I mean, you can't say, well, what I'll do is I'll just take care of this problem, and it's an economic problem. Mm-hmm. If you understand that economics is a part of the problem, but not the whole problem. Even if you had money, but if your mind is still in the dope den, right, then money ain't going to help you. And even if you got an emotional problem and you went to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, mm-hmm, but you still haven't addressed other problems that in your life, your mama-daddy relationship, your home relationship, it's multidisciplinary. There are multiple things that have to be done to solve what we think might be our problem. And so there's no one thing that we can say today professionally. There's no one discipline that if you go and do this, then all of the problems are going to be solved. There are multiple disciplines. They are interactive, and we have to use them all. Now, the real challenge of it is that that's going to take time. One of our problems, if you ask me as a professor, most of us want it now. Mm-hmm. We don't understand that the solution to whatever problems we have are long term. Then nobody's going to go to court tomorrow and win a case, and then all the blacks are going to be free and we'll be happy forever. That ain't happening, because there are multiple, problems with that. But we have to understand that we have to try and understand the multiple disciplinary things that interact on our lives, that shapes our behavior and conduct, that ultimately that we have to learn to address in a multifaceted way.
So is it safe to say that if a lot of the people who see the problems in their areas act on them,
absolutely,
and do something about it, then it'll be much better?
See, the worst thing to do is to go to church on Sunday. And I'm on the deacon board in my church. Mm-hmm. But the worst thing to do is to go to church on Sunday. If you go to an evangelical church or a Baptist church or Church of God in Christ, and on Sunday morning, everybody's happy and shouting and praising God and mm-hmm, saying that Jesus is the answer and Jesus is my Savior. But when you leave the church, you leave Jesus in the church. Mm. And you don't take him outside, because when you're confronted with the realities of the communities in which we live, if Jesus is all powerful, then why aren't you out there dealing with gang dealers? Why aren't you out there dealing with, students who have serious problems? I mean, there should be no challenges. I mean, there should be no doubt that if you have faith and if you believe in what you are taught in the church, mm-hmm, then you should take that to the streets and use that as a healing tool to try and help people. Exactly. Most folk are perfectly comfortable on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. The real challenge is, what do you do on Monday about the thing that you were praying on Sunday? And chances are you don't do nothing until next Sunday, because then you're back praying again. And for 6 days you've done nothing, but you're still invoking on Sunday morning the name of Jesus Christ, mm-hmm, as your Savior. Christ was not no mammy-pammy person.
No, he wasn't.
And so if you believe in him, then there's nothing you won't challenge. He gave his life for you. Or at least that's what you get up and say on Sunday mornings. And if he gave his life for you, what are you willing to give to him to make a difference in the community that you live in? And make a difference with your child, make a difference with the young folk that you have to see every day with, a whole little bag of joints, a little bag of rocks, all of the bag. You see them out there every day and look at them and say, oh, isn't that a shame? Well, what are you going to do about it? My challenge to people is, it's not enough to feel that there's a problem. The challenge is, what are you going to do about it? And if your answer is, I'm going to do nothing, then sit down and turn on The Simpsons.
Well, I'm enjoying you tonight. I'm sure everyone watching is joining you tonight. Please, everyone, please call in with your question and comments at 312-738-1060. Our guest tonight is attorney Lou Myers, and we're discussing community empowerment along with bridging the intergenerational gap between young people and mature adults while creating a safe and drug-free community. And I see we have some more calls. We're going to get to those calls. Hello. Lost that caller. Next caller. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling tonight. Your question or comment, please.
I have a question for Mr. Lou Myers. And my question is, Mr. Lou Myers, do you by chance know what happened with the black community to the point where we don't desire to empower one another anymore? We're so busy being against one another, and I believe that has a lot to do with the reason why we cannot, why we're having such a hard time in this world, because we're not fighting for each other. We're not fighting for our family members, and even for those on the outside. And just want to know if you by chance know what happened to the black community to the point where we no longer desire to empower one another, so therefore we can't go out and empower someone else.
That's an excellent question, and I thank you for calling and asking that.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the civil rights movement in the 60s. And when I look today at where our community is, Dr. King would be horrified and depressed, I believe, if he had to know that the problem today in the African American community in terms of murder is not the Ku Klux Klan, but it's other blacks killing each other. That was not what we fought for. And so when you raise the question, what happened? How do we go from we shall overcome, right, to murder and mayhem and killing and dope and a community that some of us see, that's almost degenerate at times in terms of how we address it. How do we turn on each other? Ultimately, I guess there are multiple reasons, but at some point, if I had to give you the professorial answer, at some point, between 1970 and say 1980 or 1985, that was the dope problem. Crack, cocaine came in a little bit later, but first it was cocaine. Most folk, even during the early 60s, smoked a little marijuana. That's wrong, not most folk, but marijuana was certainly around. But at some point, our communities became infested with narcotics. And then we organized ourselves into little units or groups called gangs, and the gangs became criminal enterprises in terms of what they did and what the benefit of, them coming together. And we woke up overnight, and we were involved in a world that we didn't even know. None of this we fought for when we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, when Dr. King was in Birmingham in May and June of 1963. When, none of these things were there. We were fighting for a different world. We were fighting for the humanity of our people, and we were fighting for other things. We weren't fighting against each other. We weren't trying to kill each other. There were a number of social events, and I personally believe some of them we didn't have control over, that was allowed to invade our communities. And because drugs being one, and because we had no control over it, it ultimately created a certain level of degeneracy and a certain level of fratricide and internecine warfare among ourselves. So we woke up one morning and we were not fighting against racism. We were fighting to be able to get out of our house past the crack dealer and go to the store and not getting robbed. And how do we go from Dr. King and we shall overcome to I shall overrun to get back home so I won't get robbed and shot by my brother. That's a longer lecture for a different day and a different time. But we lost control at some point, and we allowed other forces to bring negativity into our communities that begin to reshape our behavior and refocus the minds of some of the most precious things that we own, and that's the minds of our kids. So they signed up for gangs when Dr. King was trying to sign them up for Christ and doing right.
We want to get to our next call. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling this evening. Your question or comment, please. Hello? Hello? Okay, next caller. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling this evening. Your question or comment, please.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, sir.
My question is, do you believe there's a conspiracy in the black community that's tearing down? Tearing down.
Okay.
I didn't understand the last part of it.
I believe his question was, do you believe, or what's the conspiracy that's tearing down the black community and not keeping them together?
Well, that's a very broad question. You know, when you use the term conspiracy, I'm always a little suspicious of that term.
Mm-hmm.
A conspiracy, you know, in the traditional legal sense of the word, is two or more people who agree to commit an unlawful act. And if that's the case, then there are probably a whole lot of conspiracies going on. Mm-hmm. Do I believe that money and power shapes conduct and behavior and shapes, you know, negative destruction in our communities? Yes, I do. I think wealth and power plays a huge role in terms of how people relate to each other. You are poor not because you want to be. You are poor because some people are making all of the money. The 1% is making all of the money and has the wealth, and they make sure that you stay in your cubbyhole in your community, and that you never get a part to share. You never get a chance to share in the wealth of the nation. I mean, one of the problems is I was just at the Cook County Jail with Reverend Jackson today and Sheriff Dart, and we went on a tour. One of the things that we learned about the jail is 10,000 folk over there, and of that 10,000, the majority are black folk, the rest are Hispanic. Probably the jail is less than 3 to 4% white. One of the things that we learned that the young men and women who are in the jail, actually we visited the first division that we visited at the Cook County Jail was the women's division. And that's where they had the women prisoners housed. But you know, most of the women were mothers. But one of the things that was noticeable, most of them had not finished high school. A lot of them went to jail because they didn't have jobs, didn't have education, didn't have jobs, and a lot of them went because they were drug addicts. And so poverty plays an immortal role in terms of keeping our people depressed, oppressed, and marginalized. But the real question is, then who is it that's blocking us from getting what we need to get to be productive citizens? And that's when you get into this conspiracy theory. I mean, who is it and why is the system set up where only 1% of the population can control almost 80% of the wealth, and minority communities control no wealth at all? And when we get into those types of questions, then, you know, we can reasonably argue that there may be something. If there is a conspiracy, it's a conspiracy of money and wealth to keep a whole group of folk impoverished, oppressed, alienated, and marginalized from day-to-day life in the system. And as long as they can make money and make money off of us and exploit us and use us, in particular to use us against each other. The largest growing business in America today is the prison industrial complex. Jails are a major business, and you know who are in jails across this country. As I told you earlier, Cook County Jail today, almost 90% of everybody there is black. And so every day at the jail, there are 3 meals a day with 10,000 people. What would your life be if you had the contract to serve food 365 days in the Cook County Jail to 10,000 people? Then at the end of the day, how much money would you be making? Wouldn't you want the jails to stay full? Because the more people every day that's in jail, the more money the more money you make, because that's your job to feed them. And so the guy who has the food contract, I'm sure, he's not trying to keep folk out of jail based on money. He wants to keep them in jail. But I can go through thousands of people who benefit from our oppression and our being incarcerated. And that's what we call the prison industrial complex. How putting us in prison makes money for everybody but us.
We want to get these last couple of calls. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling this evening. Your question or comment, please.
Okay, my comment was basically I had well, listening to him. I changed my comment. My comment is just basically that we have to recognize the fact that slavery is still going on today. You know, the modern day slavery is the jail system. You know, you have to check the amendments. You know, what does it say? It say he freed slavery. Yes, he abolished it. But in the same amendment, he says only those who did not commit a felony. You know, and we got to recognize that and realize that fact that it's out there. And this is what is going on, basically. You know, and it's still out there right now today.
I think that's a very good point. What the brother is talking about is the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment allegedly freed the slaves in 1865. That was the document that was passed by the Congress to say that you're free. Well, what people didn't read was the 13th Amendment real carefully. It said we free one group of folk, but if we put you in jail and lock you up, then we could do with you what we want to do. And that's what the brother is talking about when he says at the end of the day, they use that. That's what Michelle Alexander, you know, in her book, The New Jim Crow, that's what she's talking about. You know, they lock us up and throw away the key. And at the end of the day, when all that is done, we're really new slaves. And so I'm not arguing with, you know, the reality or the metaphoricalness of that. I think that there's truth to that. You know, slavery does still exist, and we got to recognize that to be a fact that might be far-fetched for some people, but the reality of it is the chains are still on. We just can't feel it the way we should, the way we should.
Okay, our next caller. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling.
Good evening, guys. How you doing?
How are
Just
you?
listening to your guest, and what he was saying, I mean, it ties into something that was told. Well, I mean, a program was written years ago in the 16th century. I mean, it was normally the drunkards, the destituted people that they would put in jail. When they wake up, they're on a boat. They doing slavery work. They doing people. But you know what the thing is? People have used people since the beginning of time, and is continuously using people. And the prison system is another a form of using people. It's a business. I mean, we know there's a lot of people that's in the prison system. Don't get me wrong now. There are people that did wrong. And, you know, you're supposed to pay for your wrong. But it's a lot of people in there maybe being caught with one joint, and they wait 2 years to go to prison, or they driving without a driver's license, and they get a ticket and they in prison waiting for a long time. Those kind of things, I think, is just unconstitutional. It gets to a point and makes you think people just don't care about people, and that is a heck of a thought right there. What I just said, people don't care about people anymore. Earlier in your first segment, I heard how we bridge the gap with young people. I came up in your age, up in the 60s. I remember groups used to talk to us. We played ball, and some of those guys, they used to do wrong, but we had a form of a communication in basketball, baseball, after we sit in the park or in the gym, and they telling us what we shouldn't do and what not to do. And those days, see, you could tell people things like that. We was going to say F you or things like that. But now, these days, you could tell some people, and you could literally get hurt. So some people are scared of things, of not bridging those gaps. But again, it all forms down to the main thing, what I just told you earlier. People don't care about people. A lot of people don't even care about themselves. So how if they don't care about themselves, imagine what they think about you. I don't want to hog up the show. I've been listening to y'all guys. You make some good sense. People just need to figure out things. And listen, you don't have to talk. Use your eyes. Look. If you don't have eyes, use your ears. If you don't know, use your ears. You just read Braille or something, and you'll know what's going on in this world. Listen, a wonderful show. I've seen the young guy. You've been around a long time. You grew up. You're doing a heck of a good job. Again, let me get out the show so I can hear your response, and I'm quite sure there's somebody else that wants to speak to y'all guys. And thank you for taking the call.
Okay. Thank you so much for that call, sir. Next caller. Hello, caller. Thank you so much for calling this evening. Your question or comment, please?
Yes, my question again is to Mr. Lou Myers. I just want to know if you have a solution to the problem that's going on, and I just want to hear what you
specifically.
Have to say.
Let me ask you, what particular problem are you? I mean, there are multiple problems in our community.
Bridging
So
the gap with our people coming together and working together to help one another.
Yes, I do.
Okay, I want to listen to it.
Okay, I'll be happy to tell you. First of all, we have to then recognize that our power is in our strength and us having the ability to get together and make decisions that affect our lives. So the first thing that we have to do is learn to love each other, learn to respect each other, learn to be able to talk with each other, learn to be able to challenge each other, learn to be able to grow, develop, to help grow together, to help develop against some of the problems that we live in every day. When I asked you, what particular, problems were you talking about? What I meant was there are multiple problems. There is no one solution. I started this show out by saying that the answer to the solutions or the answer to the problems that we're facing, there are multiple solutions. Maybe 10, maybe 15, depending on what you want to look at. I'm not going to be able to tell you tonight if you do X, then Y will happen and all the problems will go away. What I can tell you is, first of all, we have to organize. Secondly, we have to come together to realize that we have common interests. Third, we have to realize that we have to put together our own agenda and our own programs about where we as a people ought to be going into life. Fourth, we have to go out and execute on what we agree that we ought to be doing. We ought to have some unity in thought, some unity in behavior. We ought to have some unity in just loving each other. But there are multiple things, and there are other things that I can stay here for the next 2 hours and give you a whole lecture series. I invite you to come out to Chicago State because I do that quite often in my classrooms.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Next caller. Hello, caller.
It
Thank
is
you so
one of the things I don't know where to start. I think one of the things we need to stop doing, stop breeding our children for the prison system. And I see all the time, we look at different statistics where you look at the different news articles that only 5% a year that we are graduating blacks from these universities. Go to any university, you will see a lot of Hispanics, mostly women, not too many black men are graduating. There was more blacks in the 60s, at least graduating with high schools. And we got to start raising our children to get this in their head, where you got to be 3 times as smart, work a bare minimum 5 times as harder to teach our children to be useful, productive members of society. Start them already thinking, hey, you know what? Someday I got certain needs I got to take care of. And only one way I want to take care of by working, but not out here selling drugs, doing anything illegal, not doing any different types of inappropriate behavior.
Okay, sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the time on the wall saying that we almost out of time, so if you can wrap your comment up. Okay, would you like to speak to that before we wrap up?
No.
Well, I want to thank you once again for being our guest tonight. I want to thank everyone for calling in with their questions and comments. Once again, for the 3 events, the Safe Haven Initiative at New Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church, the basketball game, which is this Saturday, January the 11th, and also the North Lawndale Employment Network Weatherization Piece. For more information on that, please give Fathers Who Care a call at 773-287-5821. Thank you. We love you. Lou, anything else you want to?
No, I just, I think I want to compliment you, and I want to compliment Reverend Walter Jones and all of the members in the board of Fathers Who Care. I want to compliment our children, the young people that I watch like yourself, but we have some in the studio tonight who come out. I mean, that's the most faithful group of young folk. I love being around them. I think what you're doing as young people, reaching out, touching the community, inspiring other young people. I want to compliment you. I want to thank you all for inviting me, and I hope that you are very, very successful.
Okay, we thank you once again, sir.
Okay.
Thank everyone for calling in once again. Tune in next week where we will be discussing bridging the generational gap between young people and more mature adults, also with women empowering younger women. Thank you for watching. We love you. Good night.